Welcome to this simultaneous meeting of Babergh District Council Cabinet and Mid-Suffolk District Council Cabinet. I am Councillor John Ward, Leader of Babergh District Council, and also in attendance is Councillor Susie Morley, Leader of Mid-Suffolk District Council. We will be jointly chairing the meeting today. However, for reasons of efficiency, I will be leading the items. May I remind you of some domestic arrangements. Please ensure that you maintain social distancing from all other persons whilst in the chamber and in the communal areas. Please ensure that you wear a face covering at all times unless you're sitting down, or if you are exempt from doing so, and that you use the hand sanitizer and wipes provided. Please ensure that microphones are turned off when not in use. Please do not interrupt other speakers or hold separate conversations whilst others are speaking. If you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Please ensure that your mobile phones are on silent or switched off. And finally, we will be using e-voting for this meeting on the modern.gov app, so please could members make sure they are logged in and ready to use the app. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be filmed, except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you will be deemed by the Council to have consented to being filmed. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you are also consenting to being recorded by the Council and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. The Council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. I'll now move to the agenda. So firstly, item 1, apologies for absence.
Good morning, Chair. We have received no apologies from members, but the Chair of Babergh Overview and Scrutiny Committee has forwarded her apologies for this meeting.
Thank you, Henriette. Item 2, to receive declarations of pecuniary and non-pecuniary interest by members. Are there any to declare, members? Nope. Thank you. Item 3, paper BCA 2117 to confirm the minutes of the Babergh Cabinet meeting held on the 2nd of August 2021. You've got that in your agenda packs, Babergh members. Just quickly going through page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, and page 12. So, does any Babergh member have any points regarding the accuracy? If not, may I have a proposer, please, from Babergh? Councillor Busby, thank you. And a seconder? Councillor Malvisi, thank you. So may we now have the electronic vote, please, for the Babergh minutes?
Yes, members. The vote is now in progress on your app. Chair, that is 7 votes for and 1 abstention.
Thank you. Right, moving on. Councillor Morley.
So to MCA/21/16 to confirm the minutes of the Mid-Suffolk Cabinet meeting held on the 2nd of August 2021. Are there any points regarding the accuracy of the minutes? Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Hadding. And a seconder? Councillor Flatman, thank you very much. The Governance Officer will now conduct the vote.
Thank you, Chair. The votes are now in progress on your app. That is 9 votes for, that's carried.
Thank you. Okay, moving on, item 4, to receive notification of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme?
None received.
Thank you. Item 5, questions by councillors.
None received.
Thank you. And item 6, matters referred by the Overview and Scrutiny or Joint Audit and Standards Committees.
There has no such matter been received, Chair.
Thank you. Moving on, item 7, the forthcoming decisions list. Does anyone have any comments about any of the forthcoming items on the forthcoming decisions list? You'll see that covering today's meeting, Council and Cabinet through to the end of the year and beyond. Any comments? None from Cabinet, so Councillor Mellon.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a question on that item. Is that okay?
Yes, you may ask her.
Can I ask why there are no proposals that we can see coming to Cabinet from the forthcoming decisions list following the workshops to discuss the spend of £4 million set aside for cross-party agreement?
I will pass that to Councillor Morley. Would you like to answer that?
We're still having discussions about what those items might be, and once that's happened, then it will be coming back to Cabinet. And once it's gone to my group, then it will be discussed with PLG before coming back to Cabinet.
Councillor Mellon.
As a supplementary question then, our budget proposals were drawn back in the spring on the promise that we would get this £4 million with cross-party working. The all-councillor workshops were held in May. The collated ideas were presented to our group in June. On 9th of July, we submitted the opposition's proposals to the leader, and we'd dearly love to see some progress on this issue. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Mellon, I guess that was a statement rather than a question.
Does the leader agree it would be good to see some progress on this issue?
We absolutely are making progress, thank you.
I think that's a case of watch this space. It's going to be exciting. Okay then, if there are no other questions or comments on the forthcoming decisions list, I'll move on to item 8, which is paper BCA 2118 and also paper MCA 2117, the General Fund Financial Monitoring for 2021 to 22, the first quarter, quarter 1. And so I'll now introduce the report as the Babergh Cabinet Member for Finance. So I'm pleased to present report BCA 2118 to Cabinet, which is the General Fund Quarter 1 Financial Monitoring for this year, covering the revenue and capital financial performance for the period April to June 2021, and highlighting the major variances compared with the budget that are expected. As with last year's monitoring reports, it also incorporates the up-to-date impact of COVID-19 on the Council's finances, which is continuing this year. This remains difficult to predict, and as throughout last year, we continue to monitor the unplanned costs and loss of income and report back to the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. The headline at the end of quarter 1, I'm pleased to report, is that we are forecasting a surplus of £261,000. Our budget for this year, approved in February, was prepared during a time of great uncertainty due to COVID. Income streams were revised to reflect this, with COVID-related costs assumed to be financed from the COVID reserve. We don't yet know about next year's spending review or whether there will be a long-awaited 3-year comprehensive spending review. The 1-year review published in November last year focused on prioritising the response to COVID and supporting jobs. The Fair Funding Review, Business Rates Review and Business Rates Reset have also been delayed. Government support for businesses and workers still continued this quarter, and the table in paragraph 5.2 of your report shows the amount we have administered in quarter 1. As I have said, the Council's finances remain at risk from the effects of COVID. We had £891,000 remaining from government support funding in 2020 to 21, which we have added to the COVID reserve, giving a start-of-year reserve balance of £1.171 million. Added to this is £414,000 of funding received this year. At the moment, we anticipate that the main areas where support will be needed during 2021 to 22 are additional costs for public health, leisure and further business support. The full year impact is currently forecast to be additional cost of £613,000 and a loss of income of £309,000. The details are provided in the table in paragraph 5.6. As at the end of the quarter, council tax collection stands at £5.8 million, or 29.43%, which is up slightly from 28.7% this time last year. But the business rates collection rate is 24.15%, which is down from 26.43% for the same period last year. This will be mitigated by the £133,000 compensation payments received from government last year, which is now in the business rates and council tax reserve. Baseline business rates of £1.6 million and new homes bonus of £835,000 were forecast in the 21 to 22 budget. The key variations on expenditure and income compared with budget that have been attributed to the overall favourable variance have been identified and are listed in Appendix A. Key points to note are that car parking income is still lower due to the lockdown in force during quarter one. We have reduced the amount of costs added to outstanding council debts due to unavailability of court time, and the shortfall will be funded from the COVID reserve. On a positive note, development management activity is particularly strong at the moment, with an increase in post-lockdown applications resulting in additional income. The forecast variances will be taken into account when setting next year's budget. We received £1.807 million of SIL income in the first quarter of this year, which is up from £1.45 million for the same period last year. Apart from the 5% admin charge, this will be transferred to the earmarked reserve. Appendix B shows how we are spending the 100% business rates retention pilot funding. £755,000 is still unspent, of which £159,000 is as yet unallocated. A report will be prepared for Cabinet setting out proposals for use of the unallocated balance for feasibility work under the three themes of the Economic Strategy and Recovery Plan. Paragraph 6.8 summarises the currently predicted movements in the Strategic Priorities Reserve, with a forecast balance of £647,000 at the end of the year. At this stage, we're not showing a transfer of any of the budget surplus to this, as it is likely, along with other reserve movements, to change. The reserve details are provided in Appendix C, and we will continue to review commitments to ensure that key priorities are supported. Appendix D sets out our general fund earmarked reserves, including forecast transfers for the year. Earmarked reserve balances were £7.945 million as at the 1st of April, excluding the £4.541 million Section 31 grants received in 2020 to 21 that will be used to cover the cost of retail, hospitality and leisure reliefs during this current year through the collection fund. The end of year balance is forecast to be £6.607 million. Transfers are summarised in paragraph 6.11, but I should note that the figure for the homelessness reserve is £35,000, not the £25,000 as stated in that paragraph, although Appendix D is correct on that number. Finally, our general fund capital programme is detailed in paragraphs 6.12 to 6.15 and Appendix E. Capital expenditure for quarter one totals £526,000 against a revised programme including carry forwards of £20.79 million. Now, as always with complex capital schemes, it is difficult to accurately assess the level of payments that will be made during the financial year. The important thing is to focus on whether outcomes are being achieved by the capital investment rather than in-year variances. In addition, the profile of the anticipated spend this year is difficult to assess at this stage because of the likelihood of slippage in the delivery of some programmes due to the ongoing effects of COVID. Lastly, some items in the capital programme, such as the Strategic Investment Fund, Regeneration Fund and Bellevue, are unlikely to be fully spent in year, so the figures anticipate that a request will be made to carry forward any unspent balance at year end. I'd like to thank our finance team for preparing this report and keeping a strong grip on our finances in what is still, as last year, an unpredictable time. Before opening up for questions and debate, I'd first like to move the recommendations in section 3 of the report that the Council's surplus position of £261,000 and revised capital programme be noted. And may I have a seconder for this, please? Councillor Osborne, thank you. So, right. I'll now invite the Mid-Suffolk Cabinet Member for Finance to introduce the Mid-Suffolk report. So, Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm pleased to introduce report MCA 2117, being the General Fund Financial Monitoring for Q1, which starts on page 13 of today's Mid-Suffolk Cabinet Pack. Included within the report in section 5, it gives a comprehensive update on the financial impact to the Council of COVID-19. I don't intend to cover this in any detail in this brief introduction, but we will, of course, be happy to answer any questions that members may have on this matter. At Cabinet's August meeting, I presented the outturn for the previous year 2021 based on final pre-audit numbers. Now, those post-year-end outturns are based on actual historic numbers. In contrast, in-year monitoring and outturn forecasts, such as one before us today, are based on actual income and expense to date, in this case to the 30th of June, and then a forward prediction or forecast for the balance of the year. Clearly, this early stage of 3 months actual and 9 months forecast involves a number of uncertainties, of extrapolations and assumptions about the future. Despite these uncertainties, the exercise is important as it tests where we are against budget and involves detailed three-way discussions between the finance team, budget managers and the senior leadership team to produce the forward forecasts. At this early stage, we are forecasting a surplus position of 103,000. The table and comments in Appendix A provides the analysis and build-up to this figure, broken out into the various areas of operations and responsibilities. As is typical, the biggest positive driver is strong income in development control. The report also includes projection of the Growth and Efficiency Fund, showing a remaining unallocated balance of 1.193 million, and Appendix C gives a line-by-line breakout of our Growth and Efficiency Fund spend and commitments. Appendix D sets out the movement on all our earmarked reserves. That table shows a year-end forecast of 19.44 million, but between now and then, I anticipate various projects coming to Cabinet for approval for expenditure from the various £1 million pot set aside for climate change and biodiversity, well-being, economy, housing and communities. We don't take these approvals for granted prior to them being brought to Cabinet, so they are not yet included within the table, but clearly they will be coming forward for expenditure against these headings, and I trust this comment goes some way to allay Councillor Mellon's concerns that he expressed earlier. The projections within this report also include capital expenditure. This is set out in the table in Appendix E, which shows a comprehensive and ambitious capital programme. So at this stage in the year, all the detail is for noting only. I'd like to move the recommendations to that effect set out in paragraph 3. I'd ask for someone to second those recommendations, and we'll be happy to answer any questions members may have on the detail within the report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Do we have a seconder from Mid-Suffolk? Councillor Gould, thank you. Right, firstly, questions from Babergh members. Does anyone have any questions on the Babergh General Fund report? Councillor Busby.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, you talked about slippage on the capital expenditure account. Do we know how that will impact on borrowing costs for the year? A second question. I just wonder, on council tax, how many people, do we know how many people are claiming the 25% single occupancy discount? And I wonder whether there's any trend in that. It might give us an indication as to the kind of houses that we need to be building, or whether it's going to impact on our income going forward.
Yeah. In terms of your second question, I think that's probably something we'll have to take away unless anyone can answer that immediately. No.
Well,
no.
I didn't expect they were.
No. Councillor, before we go back to the first question, Councillor Osborne, you've got your hand up. Is that something?
Yeah, in reference to the question regarding the 25% discount on council tax, I haven't got the answer to the question, but I can go home and find it out because it will be within the shared revenue partnership report that we get. So by all means, I can do that and then email it out to the rest of the Cabinet.
We'll certainly get the answer to that one way or another, yeah. The first question you had about the borrowing costs on the capital programme, again, can anyone from the finance team provide an answer to that, please? Melissa.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we'd only actually borrow once we've spent on the capital programme, so there's no commitment to pay interest on any of those loans. We wouldn't commit ourselves to any borrowing until we'd incurred expenditure on that capital programme. So there will be a saving.
I understand that, but we must have included in the budget an estimate of how much we would like to borrow and therefore the potential borrowing costs. And this will surely be different if we, 20 million quid is quite a hefty capital expenditure. If we're not borrowing that, that should have quite an impact on the borrowing cost, shouldn't it?
We might have to come back on that one just to check what we put in the budgets for that, just to make sure.
Thank you, Melissa. Okay, if there are no further questions from Babergh Cabinet members. Oh, Councillor Busby then.
Sorry, I must have had a boring weekend.
Yeah.
Just one other thing that I don't expect to be answered today, but I just wondered, given the fluidity of staff at the moment, and I see that the figures are broken down by directorate, so the figures are in there, but I just wondered whether we could have one section of paper or an email on the number of staff by directorate, the number of vacancies by directorate, and the staff costs by directorate, and the vacancy savings by directorate. So it would be a small table of 8 lines or whatever with 4 columns, just to have it on one area rather than have to fish around the whole report.
I would imagine that would be feasible. Yes, Chief Executive is nodding, so definitely, yeah. We'll make sure we get that.
We know we've got whatever it is, 20 vacancies, which seems like an awful lot, but if you've got 20,000 staff, not that we have, it isn't.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. Moving over to Mid-Suffolk members. Do any Mid-Suffolk members have any questions on the Mid-Suffolk General Fund report? Nope. Any other members present? Okay. Right. Councillor Wellham, you were first. I'll
Thank
go
you,
across
Chair.
from Councillor Wellham to Councillor Field and then Councillor Millen after. Yeah.
At the last Cabinet meeting, I asked a question about Mid-Suffolk Leisure Centre and the expenditure thereon, or predicted expenditure thereon. And I did have a response on the 9th of August, for which thank you, but it just referred to a condition survey which had been carried out. So is it yet possible to say further work is needed as a result of analysing the condition survey, and when will it be carried out? And that was a question about the money set aside in the Transformation Fund. There's still 286k of that money to be spent, and it's shown as committed. So has that been allocated to any specific items of expenditure? Is any of it related to safety or energy efficiency improvements? And in the General Fund, there's a total of 2 million, which appears to be set aside for expenditure on Mid-Suffolk Leisure Centre for the current financial year. That's 1.337 for improvements, and the rest is for extension and refurbishment. Do we have any details of what that work is, and are we confident that it will all be spent?
Councillor Whitehead.
Well, can I just say I don't have that detail to hand, but I'm hoping one of the officers might be able to come to my assistance.
So apologies, we don't have that level of detail to hand either. So I think that's another one that we'll need to take away and provide an answer to.
That's fine, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Field, you were next.
Thank you. Just 2 points, really. Paragraph 5.2 talks about an amount of grant funding, quite considerable sums remaining. I just wanted to confirm, does that return to the government if we don't get it spent in some specific timescale? And to carry on slightly, page 24, there's a pretty chunky positive variance against development management. Just wondered, we are supposed to, I guess, talk to developers quite considerably. I wonder what we're doing to improve our forecasting there, because among other things, that sort of difference in spend represents a considerable difference in workload, I would have thought. So we need to consider doing a bit better. So that's two questions.
Councillor Whitehead, did you want to pick up on those?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to dig out an email on the detail about the grants and which ones are repayable and which ones aren't, but perhaps Catherine might be able to come to my aid if she has that information just to hand, because I know some are repayable and some are not, I believe.
I might need to defer to my colleagues, either Melissa or I think Fiona's here as well. They've been heavily involved in the grant programmes.
Yes, so there are broadly two different types of government grants. There are some smaller ones as well, but the two main ones are different versions of a mandatory grant that government gave, and not all of that money could be spent because some of it couldn't be paid, for example, to companies that reached their state aid threshold. So the government made a sort of broad brush figure. Those mandatory grants, it's my understanding, they will have to be paid back. The money that was given to the councils to spend under the discretionary fund is all now fully spent. We have spent all of that. Does that help?
Whitehead.
Yeah, and to the question about development control forecasting, and the reality is that a lot of the great amount of the positive variance comes from additional income. It is a difficult area to forecast. I'm thinking back to several years ago, we had a group away day for budgeting, and we gave each other a challenge to come up with a forecast based on looking at historical data, and I think the range of income was something like 800,000 to 2 million. It really is, it's very difficult to forecast the future development income, even with the greatest amount of discussions with developers. And I think people just generally tend to be cautious when creating a budget, because positive variances are preferable to adverse ones. But in terms of staffing implications, I don't know whether the Chief Executive or one of the ADs would like to answer that.
Thank you, Councillor. And I think it's probably fair to say that there's been quite a significant and unexpected bounce back in development management activity. So that will have also increased the income beyond what we were expecting. So, which is all good news, because it shows that we are getting back to normal rapidly, hopefully. Councillor Field, did you have another question?
I was just going to comment on that. I mean, clearly, as you say, a positive variance is infinitely better than one in the other direction, but one was a bit concerned about the forecasting, because clearly absorbing another 273 grand's worth of work in a year is quite a considerable issue, and perhaps the alternative is that work gets delayed, and that wouldn't do our reputation any good. So
well, we're not debating this now,
around
Councillor. It's just a matter of questions, but thanks for your comment. Councillor Mellon.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions on the capital programme from the table on page 29 of the report. We've got a budget of 932,000 for the disabled facilities grants, and then another 269,000 for empty homes grant. What's our ability or capacity to spend this money in this year?
Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you. Again, I'd like to just refer that question to one of our officers, if I may.
Gavin.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the question. So just in relation to DFG, Disabled Facilities Grants, members will be aware that last year, both Babergh and Mid-Suffolk and Suffolk authorities introduced an independent living service. This was to replace the former Orbit Home Improvement Agency contract. If you recall, most recently, the outturn from last year, we actually were able to spend more than 98% of the budget, which was a huge increase on previous years, and that was only on the basis of a few months of the new service being introduced. And the independent living service means that we've got officers working on behalf of Babergh Mid-Suffolk that are supporting individuals that need adaptations, and using new policies and new procedures that Cabinet have historically agreed in relation to minor works and some of the values. So we're confident that that DFG spend will be spent, and I think actually for Cabinets and for members, there'll probably be tough decisions in the future as to actually all of that expenditure being committed, and how do we look to support those individuals that still require adaptations. In relation to empty home grants, they're grants available to obviously owners of properties. We are seeing an uptake on some of those loans available, and Cabinet and members may not be fully aware, but we are in the current process of recruiting to a new revised private sector offer, which involves an officer dedicated to working with landlords to encourage the uptake of these grants and loans. So I would expect to see huge progress made over the remainder of this year and next.
Thank you, Gavin. Right. Well, we can move into debate now. So you want to respond to? Oh, yes. Okay. Certainly, Councillor Arthur. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I mean,
And
it
you
was
can move into debate
prompted,
at the same time.
prompted by Councillor Field's question, really, and I don't want to steal the thunder of the portfolio holder for Mid-Suffolk. But it was just about Councillor Field's comment about workload, and he's absolutely right. The principal reasons for both the Babergh variance of around about 300,000 and the Mid-Suffolk one, which I think is about 270, the principal reasons for that are major applications. So in Babergh, it's Wolsey Grange that's come in, and in Mid-Suffolk, it's the various solar farm application fees. Part of that is in Mid-Suffolk, but because the majority of one of them is in Mid-Suffolk, Mid-Suffolk actually get the fee. So that's the reason for the variance.
Thank you, Councillor Arthur. So, Babergh Cabinet members, we're in debate now. Does anyone wish to say anything or contribute? Comment on this report? If not, Mid-Suffolk members, does anyone wish to comment on the Mid-Suffolk report? In which case then, we can go to the vote, please, Henriette. Thank you.
And sorry, Babergh members, your vote is now in progress too. Sorry, Chair, I'm going to do it reverse order this time. So for Mid Suffolk, the vote is 9 votes for, and that's unanimous.
Thank you.
Councillor Busby, have you voted?
Yeah, about 12 times, but it doesn't seem to get to the confirm stage.
May I take your vote, please?
Yep, it was 4.
Chair, so that is 8 votes for, and that's unanimous too.
Thank you, Henriette. Moving on, item 9, paper BCA 2119 and MCA 2118, the Housing Revenue Account Financial Monitoring 2021 to 22, quarter 1. I'll now introduce the report as the Babergh Cabinet Member for Finance. So I'm pleased now to introduce the report BCA 2119 to Cabinet, the HRA quarter 1 financial monitoring for this year, covering the revenue and capital financial performance for the period April to June 2021 and highlighting the major variances compared with the budget that are to be expected. As with the General Fund, it incorporates the up-to-date impact of COVID-19 on the Council's HRA finances. The headline at the end of quarter 1 is that we are forecasting an adverse variance of £223,000. As always, the financial position of the HRA should be viewed in the context of the updated 30-year business plan. The budget set in February this year showed a forecast surplus position for 21 to 22 of £127,000. And we should always remember that there will be unplanned events that affect income and expenditure in any given year, and so we must consider these annual variances in the context of the medium-term outcomes we wish to see. We're now in the second of 5 years where we can increase rents by CPI plus 1%. There's still going to be a COVID impact on the HRA throughout this year, and new build and repairs and maintenance have restarted, but with additional COVID-related costs. There will also be additional costs to address the repairs and maintenance backlog. There's not been any reduction in income levels during the first quarter of 21 to 22, but we could start to see arrears when the furlough scheme comes to an end this month, as tenants who are in employment may be impacted. However, levels of debt to be written off are expected to be very low, if any, as any outstanding rents are likely to be reclaimed, albeit over a longer period, because of secure tenancies. The revenue position is detailed in section 6 of the report, and the table in paragraph 6.5 lists the main items in the budget, along with the variations on expenditure and income compared with the budget. Descriptions of the variances are provided in paragraph 6.6 to 6.10, and the main contributor is the adverse variance of £267,000 for building services, and this is explained in paragraph 6.9. The forecast variances will be taken into account when setting next year's budget. All this means that our HRA balances are forecast to be £16.673 million at the end of the year, as detailed in paragraph 6.10. As I mentioned in the General Fund introduction, with complex capital schemes, it is difficult to accurately assess the level of payments that will be made during the financial year. The important thing is to focus on whether outcomes have been achieved by the capital investment rather than in-year variances. The capital programme is itemised in Appendix A, and further detail provided in paragraphs 611 to 614 of the report. Actual capital expenditure for quarter 1 totals £3.12 million against a budget of £27.61 million. We are expecting the full year capital spend to be equal to the budget, but it is unlikely to be fully spent based on past experience. Before opening up for questions and debate, I'd first like to move the recommendations in section 3 of the report that the adverse variance of £223,000 and revised capital programme be noted. May I have a seconder for this, please? Councillor Osborne, thank you. I'll now invite the Mid-Suffolk Cabinet Member for Finance to introduce the Mid-Suffolk report. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd now like to make a brief introduction to report MCA 2118, which is a Housing Revenue Account Financial Monitoring for 21-22, quarter 1. The budget for this current year, 21-22, showed a surplus of 102,000. However, we are now anticipating a deficit for the year of 452,000, an adverse turnaround or variance of 554,000. The table in paragraph 6.5 shows that the principal driver of this variance is a predicted cost overrun in building services. All other income and expense streams show minimal change from budget of 1% or less. Paragraph 6.10 provides the explanation for this adverse variance in building services. As we emerge from the COVID restrictions, there is a backlog of void and responsive repairs to be undertaken, and the forecast to the year end assumes a significant use of subcontractors to support the trades team in completing this work. It's my hope that the forecasted adverse variance of 690,000 in this area will prove to be an over-prudent estimate, but only time will tell. This report also covers the HRA capital programme, and the detail is in Appendix A, with covering narrative in paragraph 612 to 615. The table shows a low level of actual capital spend during the first quarter at 1.564 million. And although the table suggests a catch-up to the 39.959 million budget by the year end, paragraph 615 in our report includes a note of realism that this is unlikely to be the case. We will, of course, as usual, be bringing further updated forecast to Cabinet based on the half-year and three-quarter-year actuals in due course, which should provide a clearer picture of both the revenue spend on repairs and maintenance and actual capital spend as the year progresses. The financial position is merely for noting at this early stage, and I'd like to move the recommendations to that effect as set out in section 3 of the report. I would invite Councillor Lavinia Hadlingham as Cabinet Member for Housing to second those recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. So may I have a seconder from Mid-Suffolk? Councillor Hadlingham. Thank you. Are there any questions, Babergh members, on the Babergh HRA report? Yeah, Councillor Busby, yes?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. Sorry, Catherine. I still find this depreciation on our housing stock of interest. We know house values are rising, but we're charging depreciation on them, which is fine, except we're also charging all of the maintenance and repairs into our account. So, in theory, the amount that we spend on maintenance and repairs should bring the housing stock back up to the value that it was before. So it seems to be like we're charging the account twice, once for the actual repairs and once for an estimated depreciation, which there isn't after we've spent the money.
I'll try and answer this, but I might hand over to my finance colleagues if I get it wrong, so they can tell me. The depreciation that we charge into the housing revenue account, we actually can then use to finance the expenditure itself. So it's a bit of a quirk and an anomaly of the housing revenue account. So it is contributing towards how we finance that actual expenditure, as you say, to keep the assets up at the standard that we require them to be. So it's not quite the double charge that I think you were thinking. It is used to pay for that maintenance.
It does appear in here twice, doesn't it? Or is it only on this but not in the accounts?
It goes through a reserve called the Major Repairs Reserve, I believe. I've seen some nods in front of me. So it goes from there into the reserve, and then we use that reserve to fund the expenditure to keep the assets up to standard.
Thank you. I'll guarantee that I won't ask about depreciation again, at least until next time.
Thank you, Councillor Busby. That's good. Any other questions from Babergh? If not, Mid-Suffolk. Any questions from Mid-Suffolk members? No. Any questions from 3 non-cabinet Mid-Suffolk members on the Councillor Field?
Thank you. Try another comment if Councillor Busby understands that. I hope he'll explain it to me someday. Seriously, the question about building services. We have 658 k spend there for reasons that are explained. One was wondering, is it possible to pay that from the COVID reserve in one case, or is there some other underspend? As this is delayed work, presumably there's money we didn't spend previously to fund that. Really, the question is about the COVID reserve.
Councillor Whitehead?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, my first initial reaction is to think that some of the actual repairs and void work that's needed is not effectively COVID related, although I take your point that the deferral and then the catching up is sort of COVID related. But I think I'll just pass that over to our finance officers to see what their thoughts on it are.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Yeah, I think it's possibly the latter that you were saying, because if you remember from the outturn from last year, there was quite a big underspend on the capital programme, so we didn't need the revenue contribution. So we're trying to catch up on what didn't get spent last year. So that money has actually been put into the Strategic Priorities Reserve rather than the COVID reserve. So it's all sitting within Mid-Suffolk's HRA reserve balances and can be used for future expenditure. Yes.
Thank you.
Gavin, did you want to come back on that?
Thank you, Chair. This might not be the precise answer to the question that Councillor Field asked, but I think it adds value to the conversation at this point. The whole housing sector inevitably saw a huge wave of new work coming down the track as a result of the 3 lockdowns last year and the inability for any housing service to carry out what we'd call sort of responsive repairs separate to the emergency works that we undertook. Just to give cabinets and members an overview of some of the work that is actually going on at present to remedy the situation, because clearly what we don't want are tenants waiting long times for repairs that require work. So initially triaging repairs, prioritising which repairs need to be carried out, and that's being done by officers within the building services team, and we've adjusted a lot of the comms on the website in relation to when to report repair, how to report a repair, the types of repairs and so on. We did a lot of work last year in terms of social media and a video as well to support tenants at that stage. We are using subcontractors. Inevitably, if anyone has had any attempt to get building work done to their own property, you'll know how hard it is to find subcontractors, but we have got some reliable subcontractors that we've had a relationship with for a long time, and we are utilising them wherever possible. In relation to both the responsive repairs and the voids, we've seen an uptake in the number of voids as well. We are providing some overtime opportunities for existing operatives, tradespeople within our team to conduct works on Saturdays to play catch up. And on separate to that, based on separate business cases, we have actually employed additional tradespeople over the past 12 months to effectively support the team, increase the productivity, long-term reduce the dependency on subcontractors. We are shortly, within the next 2 months, installing scheduling software that will give officers within the customer access point and later tenants the opportunity to book the repair and book the time and the date that repair is carried out. And the reality is that will improve productivity. We're actively working with Travis Perkins, our main material supplier, and that's in relation to obviously the cost of materials and the supply of materials, which has been a significantly impacted, as I know everyone will know. We've also introduced a new way of working, which prevents operatives having to go to Travis Perkins to pick up materials, and actually materials are delivered on site, alleviating some of that time and obviously CO2 emissions in terms of driving around the estates. We've also seen a number of properties returned to us that require substantial works through voids, and we're obviously actively working on repairing those, but also looking at a new lettable standard which will set out the expectations that incoming tenants can expect, new tenants can expect from us in terms of the quality of homes. And then just a couple more. We've also got a project that we've embarked on in relation to new ways of working and how the building services team, in light of COVID, in light of the pandemic and how it's impacted on on every sector, how we work differently in the future. And lastly, we are also in the process of trying to let a series of long-term contracts. It is more cost-effective and more planned if we can have contracts in place rather than responding, and therefore we're letting a series of 5-year contracts for a variety of different types of building services, which ultimately will reduce cost as well.
Thank you, Gavin. That's great, thank you. Right, so now I'll open this up for debate. Baber members, do any of you wish to comment on this report? Mid-Suffolk members? In which case, I'll ask the Governance Officer to conduct the electronic vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. The vote is now in progress on both apps. Councillor Davis? Right, may I take your vote verbally, please? Sorry? 4, thank you. Chair, so that is 8 votes for Baber, that's unanimous.
Thank you.
And it's 9 votes for Mid-Suffolk, and that's also unanimous.
Thank you, Henriette. Right, there'll now be a short break to allow officers for the next item to be seated. So if we turn off the live stream for a few minutes, please. Sorry, welcome back everyone. The next item is item 10, paper BCA 2120 and MCA 2119, the quarter one performance presentation. I'll now invite the Babergh Cabinet Member for Customers, Digital Transformation and Improvement to introduce the Babergh report. Councillor McCraw.
Thank you, Chair. Members, I'm pleased to introduce the quarter one performance report for Babergh District Council, to be followed by Councillor Morley introducing the relevant parts for Mid Suffolk. The report is in the same format as we have seen recently. I'd like to draw attention beyond, just particularly to the first paragraph, regarding the successful nominations in the IESE Awards that our housing team has been celebrating. They've been shortlisted for a national award by a local government magazine, and that success in the Community Heroes of the Year category recognised the team's efforts in keeping vulnerable residents off the streets during the pandemic, as well as the transformation of a derelict property in Sudbury, literally over a weekend, like so. Now, this is a high-level report, so I'm going to draw attention to some of the highlights in that report, if I can find my papers. So the report reflects, and the papers reflect, the continued support and assistance that we've offered in the recovery from the pandemic, together with information on the progress made against our 6 key priority areas, predominantly from April through to June. The key indicators in the separate departments, and members might like to ask individual questions of the Cabinet members. In economy, the bid to level up the funding for bus junctions in Sudbury, the successful launch of the extension of the virtual high street in Hadley, 50 businesses having signed up to the scheme. I believe this might be reflected elsewhere in the area. A sign-off of an employment site at Hadley. In environment, we've seen a continual increase in the number of garden waste subscribers. Over 16,000 subscriptions now, and for the first time ever, we've collected 1,000 tonnes of garden waste in June. The Wenham Depot decarbonisation project is on schedule. The leisure centres for both councils have transferred to green tariffs, and we're hopeful of improvements in the fly tipping situation, although it is one of those things that can go up and down. On the customers' portfolio, I think it's probably something I should comment on. I'm very glad to say that 50 searches, the top 50 searches on our website have been gone through to improve the responses. We were not getting accurate responses that were directing people in the right place. We now think that that is the case, and those 50, I can provide a breakdown for anybody that's interested. Our new e-forms are receiving a satisfaction rating from customers as 4.6 out of 5. This is probably to reflect that a lot of the cases were basically where we had a satisfaction rating given on the fact that the bin hadn't been collected. Now, that wasn't actually a satisfaction question, that was the response was being dealt with, so it was inaccurate. In communities, we have capital projects helped to fund Preston St Mary Village Hall, Nedging with Norton Village Hall extension, and the Pinewood Community Centre car park refurbishment. The leisure, sport, physical activity, action plans and strategies are being developed in both councils. In well-being, Sudbury Easter holiday activities saw 9 families take advantage of a family cooking project. That's a 90% take-up since there were only 10 slots available. And 17 children attended Adventure Days. There are other matters going on in well-being. Was work being done with the Youth Social Prescribing Framework, and we're working in partnership with the Tobacco Control Alliance, again in both councils, to reduce smoking and vaping within the workplace, as well as with other businesses in the district. In housing, 19 new affordable homes have been acquired or built during Q1, and 10 new homes have also been handed over at Woolsey Grange in Sproughton. There's a case study on the My Home Bulletin, which is in your papers. And then the final item I was going to mention, actually it's not the final item, is the health of the organisation. We've completed some letting of land at the South Suffolk Business Centre for use for the Go Start community buses. One thing I do have to mention is a increase in the length of time it is taking for us to answer phone calls. It's something that occupies members' attention every time it comes up. And the reason is higher call volumes, but the call volumes is not just the rate of them, it's the complexity of them. We saw a 17% increase to 600 calls per day as an average, which means that the peaks were higher, and the sort of questions were more complex, requiring, well, things like council tax recovery, responsive repairs. The backlog also was reflected in our customer service provision. So we have a higher waiting time than we would like. Steps have been taken to hire more staff and train those staff so that they can become as effective as the rest of our customer services team already are. Obviously, I'll be happy to take any questions on the various parts of that, and I'll hand over to Councillor Morley.
Thank you, Councillor McCraw. So this item is for noting only, but I'll now then pass over to the Mid-Suffolk Cabinet member for the same portfolio, Councillor Morley.
Thank you. As you will see, the performance reporting for Q1 has continued to follow the revised format, allowing for reporting of key performance indicators and information on the work being undertaken by our district, providing high-level assurance that the Council is delivering against our corporate plan. I would like to take this opportunity to mention some of the key achievements and performance indicators within the presentation to highlight not only the progress being made on a number of key projects, but also as a reflection of the continued commitment of all officers and councillors in striving to achieve our strategic outcomes and ensure effective recovery from the COVID pandemic. So on economy, we've commenced the work at the Needham Lake Visitor Centre. That is now well underway. The successful launch of the extension to the virtual High Street project rolled out in Stowmarket and more recently in Needham Market and for environment, we've seen a continual increase in the number of garden waste subscribers, and this has led to a record 1,122 tonnes of garden waste being collected in June. However, there's also been an increase in the contamination of recycling waste collected, and this has increased to 16.67%. We've also acquired some key biodiversity land in Stowmarket as part of our carbon reduction plan. Councillor McCraw has already mentioned top searches on our website, especially around the new electronic forms that our customers are really rating quite highly. On communities, our capital projects have helped fund grants for new play equipment at Coddenham Community Centre, along with developing community space at a church in Stowmarket. And our leisure, sport and physical activity strategy has now gone through Cabinet, and we are now developing the action plan. For wellbeing, our Easter holiday family cooking school saw a take-up of over 90% at both Stowmarket and with well over 60 children also attending the Adventure Days. Holiday activity funding was awarded to a number of venues in Stowmarket to deliver summer activities targeted at children in receipt of free school meals. Housing, there's been a reduction in the number of households requiring temporary accommodation. However, we do have some voids which are at 33 days, which is higher than our target. And there are some good reasons for these. There are a number of properties that required using right to buy receipts, which required extensive work, such as kitchens, bathrooms, and rewiring ahead of letting. And we also had voids resulting from tenancies where people had lived there a long time, and properties that we received back were in a very poor condition, needing lots of work to bring them up to standard. So this is, while the majority of properties in Mid-Suffolk were completed within the 21 days, these properties which required the additional works went well over the number of days and therefore pushed up the average. There were 42 housing-specific planning applications granted, which will deliver 290 homes. And also, Pure Gym has now opened its premises at Gipping Way in Stowmarket. This is on the site of the former Aldi. So, thank you, Councillor Ward. That's the performance report.
Thank you, Councillor Morley. Again, that item is for noting only, but now I'll open it up to for questions. So firstly, questions from Babergh members. Do you have any questions on this report? Councillor Arthey.
It's a comment more than a question, I suppose, but it's regarding fly tipping, and you'll see in the report that there's been a reduction of 50%. But if you go to page 49, you'll see what the trend is, and particularly in Babergh, we saw a 100% increase during the COVID period, and now we're reporting a 50% reduction. Just to be clear, a 100% increase followed by a 50% reduction means that we're back to where we were. So it's not actually an improvement, really. It's just a returning to the sort of average number of fly tips that we've seen. And can I carry on with wait times for calls? Just that last week I had a personal experience. We talk here about wait times as an average. Just to be sure about this, that average is obviously has extremes at one end and the other. And last week I was actually on the phone for 12 minutes waiting. And then I had to call back about half an hour later, and it was 15 minutes before I was connected. So these wait times can be quite significant. To be fair, that was for council tax, which is actually not a Babergh or Mid-Suffolk service, because it's done through Ipswich Borough Council under the Shared Revenues Partnership. However, I still think that waiting over 10 minutes for somebody to connect you is too long.
Thank you, Councillor.
And that wasn't me.
Where that came from. Thank you for that. Councillor Davis. Well, you can save it for debate in a bit if you want to, but...
Okay, I'll save it.
Okay, yep. Councillor Busby.
Environment. One of our objectives is to plant trees, and it says that one of the things that we'll be doing over the next few months is planting trees over the winter months. How many trees and where will we be planting them?
Councillor Malvisi, do you have an answer for that?
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Busby. We're gathering the data. We've just completed a canopy survey of the trees in Mid-Suffolk and Babergh, and that data is currently being collated. Unfortunately, the individual that was doing it is off sick at the moment, but we are on track. We should be able to come to Cabinet with more information by the end of this month, beginning of next. Where they're planted will depend on not just where there is space, but whether or not the parish councils and town councils want that tree where we're suggesting, because they're being asked to identify their land, their landowner's land, that is willing to receive these trees and hedgerows.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, now move over to Mid-Suffolk. Any questions from Mid-Suffolk members? Any questions from other Mid-Suffolk? So, Councillor Wellham. Okay, well, unexplained noises are probably a feature of this meeting today. We'll just have to proceed and work our way through them. Councillor Wellham.
Yes, thank you, Chair. My two questions are about the Women's Tour and Needham Lake. Reading on page 60, the Women's Tour activity will be planned between July and September as tour details are announced. When will we be provided with details of what's going on in Mid-Suffolk in connection with the women's tour? I believe that there is something in Stowe Market going on, but we really need to advertise any activity to promote the women's tour coming through our district. And in order to do so, I think we need to use village magazines, and copy dates for village magazines are probably about now or just gone. I mean, in the case of advertising anything or promoting anything in Stowe Upland, the copy date is the 7th of September for the October magazine. After October, it's too late. And similarly about Needham Lake, I asked about this last month. Do we have an opening date yet? Are activities for the public being planned for the opening date? And when can we be given details so we can publicise them locally?
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Richardson, can you provide responses? Thank you.
Oh, there we go. I think that's better. Thank you, Chair. I can answer the first question about the women's tour. So we are in the final stages of putting together a community activity plan that works with not just ourselves, but with the county council, town, parish councils, other businesses and community groups to help publicise and to mark that event. So I appreciate when this paper was published, which would have been more than a week ago, that was still saying we are planning to do that, but we have now completed that. So there was a briefing to myself and the Cabinet Member for Communities last Wednesday, I think it was, that outlined what that is. So that piece of work is now done, and we'll be publicising that in the coming days. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And in terms of the... Sorry, Councillor Morley? Oh, you can provide some further update, can you? Okay. And Councillor Morley or Councillor Flatman, who wishes to...
Well, I was just going to say that we did do a press release on the 21st of July that went out that actually said what the route was going to be. So that may help.
The press release in July highlighting the route, so that has been, all members have been informed about the actual route that it'll take through Mid-Suffolk and Babergh. And that was published back in July.
Well, absolutely, because I asked questions about it last month. Yeah, people all over the country know where the route is, but what we don't know is what community activities have been planned. I mean, I know that there are schools that would like to go and see the cyclists go through, but we don't. And I know that it comes along Finborough Road and it comes past the. But I understood there were activities planned for the recreation ground. Well, you know, it's about now or a couple of months ago that we needed to know what it is on the recreation ground and where it is on the recreation ground, and what sort of activities is it appropriate for. I mean, I understand that there's a plan to publicise it, but I don't know how you're planning to publicise it. But quite often, for events that affect or to which people living in villages might be invited, the best way to get them invited is through the village magazines. And most of the village magazines go to print first 10 days of September for delivery in time for October.
Councillor Flatman, did you want to come back and provide any further information, please?
Well, I had a meeting with Sue Culver the other day, and she's the officer working on this, and she will be in touch. And if you've got the actual tour coming through your village, then she will actually be in touch with the cabinet member, council member for that village. So I know she's actually putting it together as we speak. But that's all I know. I don't know if Vicky knows any more.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the question. There is a vast programme of activity taking place, and Councillor Flatman's correct that Sue Calver has been working with town and parish councils and with schools as well in terms of what activities will be taking place. We're also working alongside the county council with regards to campaigns. So, for example, with schools, there'll be things like a T-shirt competition where children are invited to design T-shirts around the tour. So that programme of activity is now being signed off. It's part of a much wider activity and programme with County Council as well. So we will look to seek and make sure that that is circulated as soon as possible. And if we can do that, we will do that this week.
Thank you, Vicky. Councillor Flatman, did you want to answer the question about Needham Lake? Thank you.
Yes, progressing nicely. I'm not about to tell you the date yet that we are absolutely going to be finished, because as you know, materials are a little bit hard to come by at the moment, but we are doing very, very well, and we are hoping it will be, well, watch this space, but I'm not going to give you a date because I can't guarantee that's going to happen, but it's all underway, and yes, that will be well publicised, what we're going to do to, you know, attract people down there for the opening, etc.
Thank you, Councillor. Right, if there are no further questions, we'll move into debate. Councillor McCraw, did you want to?
It's just a comment on the Women's Tour. There's quite an extensive web page on the Women's Tour with connections for community activities and guidelines, so I'm pretty sure it can be pulled together very easily.
Yeah,
I just happen to know that Sweet Spot normally would, the organisers of the Women's Tour and the Men's Tour of Britain, have, obviously normally they'd have done all this stuff in the spring, but in the spring it was impossible to say whether the tour or the tours could run. So some time has been lost. That's not made things easy.
No, I understand that. Just to remind everyone, we are looking back over the past 3 months, not looking forward either to this quarter, the current quarter, or the future quarter. So this is just a review of the first quarter of this year. Councillor Davis, you wanted to...
Yeah, well, I will go back to Q1, but just to an extent, and I appreciate this is very so I'm not cut across anybody else. But the individual towns and villages, for example, this is Long Melford, have already started because, as Julia said, Sue Calver has been to the various places and helped the parish councils, and I'm sure exactly the same in Glemsford, I know, because that's part of the sprint stage and the Queen of the Mountains. So they've done an awful lot of work, but Sue is the person to do that. And also there's a media cycle on Friday, and at the end of that, obviously there'll be more publicity. And as Harry has said, it's Suffolk County Council that are leading on that part of it. And so various towns need to sort of focus on their own. But the general information will come further from that as well. And then there's a public ride later on as well. So the publicity is being ramped up literally day by day. That's just on the ride. But the comment I was going to make was to actually say 2 thank yous. First of all, to the communities team for everything that they've been doing with this and everything else you'll have seen. It's all positive stuff, and it's great to be able to see this. So, well done to our communities team on that. And also, well done to the members, because we know the problems over the past couple of years about briefings and members feeling they haven't been informed well enough. So for the amount of members to turn up to the health and wellbeing, the community grants review briefing workshop that was held by Vicky and the team was great, because that's the way all the members can get that further information to be able to take back to their villages and parishes and towns. So well done to all the members that turned up for that, and a huge well done to Vicky and her team for putting this and the report together.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm really pleased to see that 99% of fly tips have been cleared in 48 hours. I think that's great performance. However, and it is a big however, fly tipping is a concern to members and to our residents. It's a very high priority as far as they're concerned and we're concerned. And I would rather that we looked at prevention rather than cure. Cure is very, very expensive, very costly, whereas prevention, long term, would work out a lot cheaper. And also not just on the bigger sites where we get commercial fly tipping, but also on our own developments where you just get the occasional mattress or the occasional old unused barbecue left for collection. And I really would like to see more prevention going on in this area. The other thing is, I appreciate we're looking back rather than forward, but I really want to take this opportunity to say about the 21 units that have become available at Angel Court. Despite COVID, it's been achieved nearly on target. I understand that all the rented properties have now been allocated, and there's a big take-up for the few shared ownership that there are there. But it was really, it's a great effort, and I know it's been appreciated by those people that are going to be living there. We had a handing over the keys a couple of weeks ago, and the quality of the build is very, very good, and it's a real example of where Babergh is going to with their housing development programme. So well done to all. And also, just quickly, is the 8 coming forward in Shotley very, very soon. They'll be advertised as being going on to Gateway for allocation. There's an example of not just going in and repairing voids, but looking at the sites. There were 2 sites with bungalows on, and instead of repairing the 2 buildings on there, we knocked them down, and instead of 2 bungalows, we've now got 4 on each site. So there again, it's a good way that Babergh are looking at a proactive way to deliver housing for our local communities. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Osborne, and I'd like to concur that the fly tip clear-up rate is excellent. It's all part and parcel of our really good waste service that we provide to our residents. Councillor Malvisi.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Just to come back to Councillor Osborne's concern over fly tipping, we're currently pulling together a litter and fly tipping strategy in Babergh, and we would draw attention to the case study and how to report fly tipping, because of course people that fly tip for some reason don't know that they are fly tipping. They're quite surprised. Fly tipping is leaving waste even around bottle banks and clothing banks and other such waste collection points where maybe the container is full and the individual with the waste just drops it by the side. So we're in the process of recruiting a waste management officer. And last week we had discussions where we actually felt that this individual should be going around schools and explaining what fly tipping is. Because if the children are embarrassed at what their parents are doing, we're more likely to succeed. Because the parents will find an excuse, whether it's an excuse for parking incorrectly or for fly tipping, whatever. They will find an excuse. Promise they won't do it again, but they will.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you.
If there are no further comments from Babergh, I just got a couple of things I just wanted to mention myself. The 15.15% contaminated recycling material is still too high, and I think we do need to see if we can have another programme of publicity and education around that, because I'm sure people don't. Some of it's accidental, some of it may be deliberate, but a lot may be down to people just not realising what can and can't go in the blue bins. Councillor Malvisi, your point about schools, again, a campaign in schools just to remind the children of what is recyclable and what isn't, I think would help there considerably. The other point I wanted to mention was the garden waste subscription service. We've seen a further increase. It is proving to be incredibly popular. My only comment is not really for members here, but actually for the government. Please don't interfere with the garden waste service. It's working very well. I have passed that information to my MP, and I hope that ultimately it will be heard at higher levels, because we don't want them to do anything that would interfere with that service and leave it up to us as local authorities at a local level to provide the kind of service and the charging for that service that we think fits our own district. However, we'll wait and see. I'll move over now to Mid-Suffolk. Any members Mid-Suffolk wish to comment on this? Sorry, Councillor Fleming.
Yes, thank you very much. I just thought I'd mention two things. One is on the fly tipping. We did have a successful prosecution recently, which was in the paper, but the fine was only £1,000, and that's way too low. And unless something is done to increase the approach by the judiciary to the problem, then it really does dishearten our officers and all the effort that goes into the very difficult job of putting together the piece of information, taking them to court, and the very high-level evidence that's needed in order to successfully prosecute. I don't know, that also is probably a message to MPs, but that's a ridiculously low fine. The other thing I wanted to mention about garden waste contamination, that there is a trend, and I'm not saying it's necessarily in Suffolk, but where garden waste collection is free, the rate of contamination is higher than if it's subscribed.
Thank you, Councillor Fleming. That's a very useful observation there about the garden waste. Councillor Richardson.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to briefly mention that I completely endorse everything that Councillor Davis said about our communities team. I think they've done a fantastic job over the last few months, not just in responding to the needs of the community during the lockdown, but also in all of the initiatives, both across the communities and wellbeing portfolios that they've been working on. And as has been mentioned quite rightly, there's a lot of positive news stories in this report. And on top of all of that, there's obviously been the production and now completion of the wellbeing strategy, which got an enormous amount of very positive feedback when it came to an all-member briefing on Thursday of last week. So as much as there has been some great progress over the last financial quarter, I think we'll see that continue, and in fact we'll build on that with the new wellbeing strategy. So I think it's a very, very exciting time. And again, Councillor Ward, I think you mentioned this in another respect, but it's definitely a case of watch this space, I think. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Brewster.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just looking at the economy work that's been going on, obviously everyone can read what's there, but there's an awful lot going on, including the COVID grant funding, which 36 million and just in excess of 500,000 there, which included economy, it included finance, SRP, quite a big team. And I really applaud them for the work they've done there. But having said that, obviously the work has still been going on, but I'm sure that the teams will be happy that they've now come to the end of the funding, the government funding, to go out to businesses and be able to get on with their day jobs, which I know they wanted to do and did succeed in doing some of it as well, or quite a lot of it. I think Councillor Morley mentioned the virtual high street in her opening, and in Stowmarket there's 60 businesses which have signed up for it, and I suspect that is actually grown since this report came out. And also now I and Needham Market are having getting ready for the virtual high street, which will be launched very, very soon, I understand. I did ask Fiona if she'd got any increased figures just to demonstrate what work is going on there.
Yes, I have got some additional figures. I think you just quoted 60 in Stowmarket for the virtual high street. It's actually now 80, and I has gone up to 16 businesses signed up, and Needham 10. And as you know, we haven't really yet moved into a sustained campaign in Needham, so a lot of those have been sort of anecdotal. And just while I'm talking, I'll mention the Babergh figures as well, which is 152 businesses in Sudbury, which was the original pilot, and 65 in Hadley.
Thank you, Fiona. Yeah, I just wanted to use that as an example of the work that my team, our team, are doing, and really thank every single member of that team. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barista. And those numbers for Babergh are excellent. 65 in Hadley, and that's a tiny town, really. A population, what, about 8,000 people? One street of businesses, pretty much. And so those numbers are excellent. And I'm sure that all of the participants do value the virtual high street. It is I think, something that's very exciting for both districts. Okay, anyone else from Mid-Suffolk wish to say anything? If not, I'll close this by just saying that this item is for noting only, and the next item is a Babergh only item. So there will now be a short break so that officers can be seated for that. Mid-Suffolk, thank you very much for your attendance. on the Babergh. Welcome back to the last item on the Babergh agenda. It's item 11, paper BCA 2121, adoption of the revised table of fares for Hackney Carriages. I'll now invite the Babergh Cabinet Member for the Environment to introduce the report. Councillor Malvisi.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm very pleased to bring BCA 2121 to the Cabinet. On the 16th of August, a revised table of fares came back to the Licensing and Regulatory Committee following a 28-day consultation with the trade and the general public. Cabinet might remember that the previous dual table of fares, which was adopted on the 4th of February 2021, was found to be potentially discriminatory following the decision. This table was therefore suspended, and the licensing team worked closely with the trade and other stakeholders to develop an alternative proposal. The proposed table of fares on which we have recently consulted is based on suggestions from drivers, operators and meter agents. The aim is to provide an increased income for the trade, whilst ensuring taxi travel is affordable for all and those who are only able to travel in one of the larger wheelchair-accessible vehicles are not penalised. It will be an operational decision for each operator and proprietor whether the maximums are charged, as they have the discretion to charge less if they so wish, and a passenger is entitled to attempt to negotiate a lesser fare. However, proprietors must meter the maximum fares permissible in the district. Maximum fares must be transparent to the fare-paying passenger and should enable operators to charge realistic fares. The consultation on the proposed table of fares ran from the 14th of June to the 12th of July 2021. The statutory public notice was issued in the East Anglian Daily Times, 14th of June 2021 edition. A notice was posted at the council offices and notices were placed at the customer access points within the district and on the Babergh website. The consultation documents were posted to 234 taxi and private hire operators and drivers. No responses to the consultation were received from the public. One response was received from the trade, which was supportive of the proposal. Can I mention the individual's name? Okay. It was from a Mr. Steve Hale, who was one of the main objectors to the previous proposal. Mr. Hale attended the committee on Monday and, with permission of the chair, assisted the committee by answering questions on the proposed tariff. The committee were also shown some example journeys to compare the cost based on the tariff, which is currently in operation, and the proposed tariff, which shows that there is a modest increase, providing an increased income for the trade while still being affordable to travellers. The committee voted unanimously to recommend to Cabinet to adopt the proposed table of fares and that they should come into force on the 1st of November 2021. The recommendation before you today are as follows. Firstly, the Cabinet, following consideration of Licensing and Regulatory Committee's recommendation, adopts the revised table of fares attached at Appendix A to this report, and in accordance with Section 65 of the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1976, sets the date of 1st November 2021 for these to come into effect. And secondly, that the Cabinet quashes the resolution made on the 4th of February to adopt the table of fares, which were previously recommended by Licensing and Regulatory Committee. And the other thing I would draw your attention to is that these fares have not been revised for 5 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Malvisi. May I have a seconder? Councillor Arthey, thank you. Are there any questions from Babergh members? Councillor Osborne.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I just clarify those rates that are outlined in Appendix A of this report? Is that the maximum that can be charged? Or the minimum? That's the maximum, is it, that can be charged? So although there's discretion in the charges being made, those charges can't be exceeded. Is that, am I right?
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? No. Okay, we'll move into debate. Does anyone from Babergh want to say anything about this report? It's Councillor Holt first and then Councillor Arthey.
Yeah, thank you. I'd just like to sort of sum up the whole thing really. I mean, it's the third time lucky for us. I mean, this was first brought to licence in June 20, I believe. And I don't think it puts us in a good light that we're here in September 21 discussing the same topic. And I think there's lessons to be learned probably from members, officers as a collective on the way we approach this sort of thing in the future. Because I think generally it's been a little bit embarrassing to the District Council. I'm glad to see it coming to an end and fully support the paper we have in front of us. But that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holt. Councillor Arthey.
Yeah, I don't disagree with Councillor Holt actually that we've learned something from this, but we seem to have got there in the end. So I'm happy to support it.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Yeah, as you'll know, I voted against it last time. I wasn't happy with the whole thing. So I'm delighted that it's gone back to licensing, and I'm delighted they've had further consultation with the taxi drivers and the operators, and that, yeah, we have finally come to a resolution, and I'm fully endorsing this. But I agree with the other councillors, you know, we've learned something from it. Yeah, let's make sure that we don't allow this sort of thing to happen again.
Yeah, I would concur with that and everything that's been said. But also, I think we've got there in the end, and I would like to thank Mr. Hale and the other operators for bearing with us and for working with us to get to where we are now, and also thank Emma for the work that she's put into this. And we've got what I think is a good report here, good new set of tariffs which will provide the operators with some much needed additional income. After all, it hasn't been revised for many years now, so I think we're good on this one. If there are no other comments, then we'll move into the vote. Now, there's going to be a separate vote on the two recommendations. The first one to quash the decision that was made in February, and the second one will be the new substantive recommendation for this report. So if I'll now ask the Governance Officer to open up the vote, please.
Members, your vote is now in progress on your app. For the first recommendation. Chair, that is 8 votes for, that's unanimous.
Thank you.
Members, the vote now in progress for the second recommendation. Chair, that is 8 votes for, and that's unanimous.
Thank you, Henriette. Oh, thank you, everyone. That brings today's meeting to a close, and the next meeting is Monday, 4th of October at 10:30. So, bring the meeting to